Welcome to One on One, the Daily Item's weekly digital program featuring Susquehanna Valley newsmakers interviewed by Daily Item reporters. Today's guest is local historian and author John Moore, interviewed by reporter Rick Dandes.
SMC is where you want to be for used car deals that are hotter than a firecracker. At Sunbury Motors, July brings fireworks and inventory adjustments to all pre-owned vehicles. That's right, all pre-owned vehicles have been adjusted to their lowest price of the year. SMC is where you want to be for pre-owned cars with payments as low as $119 per month. Whether it's a car, truck, van, or SUV, Sunbury Motors knows what you're looking for. Selection, the lowest price, and service after the sale. Celebrate your independence from high prices with Sunbury Motors' lowest price promise. SMC is where you need to be for the inventory adjustment sale. Only at Sunbury Motors Ford and Sunbury Motors Hyundai Lincoln in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza and Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummel's Wharf. Shop at home 24/7 at sunburymotors.com. SMC is where you need to be for used car deals that are hotter than a firecracker.
I'm Rick Dandes. Welcome to a special Independence Day week edition of One on One. Today's guest is local historian, John Moore. Welcome, John.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for inviting me. And the history gods smiled on me because when you invited me to come today, I went to my internet library and started cracking open scores of PDFs that I have. I must have 200 accumulated, looking for the lowdown on Sunbury, Pennsylvania, and I found a whole lot.
Well, before we do that, let's just talk a little about you. How did you get interested? I know you're a local journalist. You worked for the Daily Item at one point. How did you get interested in local history?
I grew up in New Jersey, and when I was a little boy, I developed quite a love for the Native American people that had once lived in New Jersey. And my question growing up was, where did the Native Americans go when they left my hometown? And I found out they came here. And I started working on a book about the Indians who had once lived in New Jersey, and my field trips kept bringing me to the Susquehanna Valley. First down around Carlisle, and then way down toward Shippensburg, and then Harrisburg, and finally here. Wow. And a job opened up at the Daily Item, and I grabbed it. And that was in 1970.
All right, and
That's a long time.
you're certainly known around here as someone who, an authority on local history. So because Independence Day is, we're taping this a few days before Independence Day, people should know. Tell me a little bit about Independence Day as it was celebrated early on in our history.
Everybody in town got involved. And one of the biggest Independence Day ceremonies started at midnight on July 4th. And that was in 1872. The reason was it was the centennial anniversary of Sunbury, which had been founded in 1772. And as soon as it struck midnight, the night of July 3rd, the morning of July 4th, church bells started to peal. There was a railroad yard, and all the railroad locomotives blew their whistles, and people set off fireworks. There was a huge midnight festivity long before the sun came up. And when the sun came up on Independence Day, 1872, railroad excursion trains started arriving. And they brought thousands of people, and they came from Harrisburg. The Rapaz Band came down from Williamsport. There was a huge parade, and featured in the parade were the war veterans of the War of 1812 and veterans of the Mexican War. And of course, there were Civil War veterans, and there were just thousands of people, and all marching, and they came to the square in what we now know as Cameron Park. And you got to imagine the day. It's a hot July day, and there's no air conditioning. The men are all wearing heavy jackets, starched shirts with neckties. Maybe there's some wearing hats to keep the sun off their faces. The women are all wearing long dresses and sunbonnets. No, maybe there's lemonade. There's no AC anywhere. No refrigeration. No really cold beverages. And the honored speaker is the judge, and his name was Judge Alexander Jordan. And he got up and he spoke for 35 long minutes. Imagine, you're drenched with perspiration.
July 4th.
July 4th.
Hot.
It's hot. You've been in the parade. You've been outside for hours. It's very humid. And the judge says that there are three things that people need to determine. One is, and I'm going to read, to celebrate the centennial anniversary of the borough, not the city, but the borough of Sunbury. Two, to celebrate the anniversary of our national independence. And three, to select a spot in the public square on which to erect a monument to the memory of the brave war who fell in the rebellion. Not the Civil War, but in the rebellion.
And that's what it was called,
And
I
that's
guess.
what it was called in 1872. And so there you have it. And I'm reading from an old history book, century-old history book. It was estimated that there were not less than 10,000 strangers in town.
That's hard to believe. Yeah, when you think of what Sunbury is now.
When you think of what Sunbury is now, but when you had 14 or 15 regularly scheduled trains
it was a
every
big
day.
Yeah, it was a big.
It was a big draw. There were
Yeah.
4 or 5 excursion trains brought, just especially people came from Shamokin, Lewisburg, Williamsport, Harrisburg. Railroads connected everybody, and there were lots of railroad passenger trains. It was very easy to move, and it was quite a big deal. And that's probably the single biggest Memorial Day. What it
Probably
was like.
ever in this town's
Probably
history.
ever, sure. Now, the July 4th that was maybe the most significant was in 1883. And that was significant because of a New Yorker named Thomas Alva Edison. And he had come to town in late May and was staying at the City Hotel. We now know it as the Edison Hotel.
Really? Wow.
And his workmen built a generating station about 2 blocks north of Market Street along 4th Street, along an alley, and they got utility poles, some of the funniest, most crooked utility poles I've ever seen, and they hung wires from the utility plant, the generating station, all the way up to the City Hotel. And then they put up additional poles all the way up Market Street to 2nd, and then down 2nd, down toward the Reading Railroad line. And there was competition. Sunbury already had gas streetlights, and many houses already were equipped with gas lights. And the workmen from the gas company felt threatened. And so at night, they would get big logs and throw them over the electric wires to knock the wires down.
Interesting. That was the electrification of
Sure.
of the air. The first electrification. maybe?
It was the first use of the Edison's 3-wire system. and it was quite a radical innovation. He wanted to demonstrate that you could use a small generating station and power a retail district in a small community and have it very self-sufficient. And so on July 4th, a huge crowd gathered at 4th and Market, and there was a brass band, and there were probably some speeches, and Edison probably made a grand entrance, and they all waited until it got dark, and then Edison threw the switch, and the entranceway to the City Hotel was electrified and illuminated, and 3 cheers for Thomas Edison. It's quite something. The next day in the daylight, they turned on the switches to the rest of the system, and there was a hotel at Market and 2nd. That became the 2nd hotel to be illuminated. They went up and illuminated the Presbyterian Church. Between the Presbyterian Church and what is now the Daily Item building at 2nd Market was the residence of William Dewart, and
Yeah.
that was the first
Yeah.
residence to be electrified. And then the wires went down 2nd Street to the Reading Railroad Station, and that became the first railroad station to be illuminated. And it was quite a very complicated deal. At one point, the supervisor went around checking on how things were working out. Mrs. Dewart was a short lady, and she said, well, she liked it fine, but she had to get up on a chair to stand up to reach the switch on the light at the ceiling. And the supervisor thought about that, and he went over to the wall, and he said, right here, and he drew an X. He had his workmen come in, and they developed a light switch.
Yeah.
And there's the invention of the wall switch for residential houses. And she didn't need to get on a chair after that, turn the lights off and on.
I mean, the science of this must have been amazing to people.
Absolutely.
You know, like,
Absolutely.
living with gas lamps for their whole lives, basically.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, here comes electricity.
Right. Yeah. It was something very hard for us to imagine.
And I would imagine Sunbury was a hub at that point.
Yes, it was.
Because of the trains, if for no other reason.
And because of the trains, because of the canal, because of, well, the canal was going out, but was still in somewhat in use. And the river was still used for some commercial boats, not much, but yeah, but it was quite an important crossroads. If you're going from Williamsport, you came through here. Going to Wilkes-Barre, you came through here. Quite complicated.
Okay. We'll be right back with more from John Moore in a minute.
SMC is where you want to be for used car deals that are hotter than a firecracker. At Sunbury Motors, July brings fireworks and inventory adjustments to all pre-owned vehicles. That's right, all pre-owned vehicles have been adjusted to their lowest price of the year. SMC is where you want to be for pre-owned cars with payments as low as $119 per month. Whether it's a car, truck, van, or SUV, Sunbury Motors knows what you're looking for. Selection, the lowest price, and service after the sale. Celebrate your independence from high prices with Sunbury Motors' lowest price promise. SMC is where you need to be for the inventory adjustment sale. Only at Sunbury Motors Ford and Sunbury Motors Hyundai Lincoln in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza and Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummel's Wharf. Shop at home 24/7 at sunburymotors.com. SMC is where you need to be for used car deals that are hotter than a firecracker.
Welcome back to One-on-One special edition, special Independence Day edition of our video interview, weekly video interview. I'm Rick Dandes from the Daily Item, and we're speaking to local historian and author and journalist John Moore. John.
Thanks, Rick.
I think, as we talked during the break, we want to go back, all the way back to the Revolutionary War period. Talk about July 4th in this area.
Sunbury and Northumberland were on the fringes of the frontier in 1776.
Yeah.
And 1778, 1779, there were large-scale Indian attacks. The Iroquois Indians coming down out of New York State, along with British Rangers, threatened the whole region, and many of the people living in Northumberland and Sunbury fled downriver to Harrisburg, and the whole frontier was basically evacuated. And George Washington in 1779 sent an army from New Jersey, northern New Jersey, over to eastern Pennsylvania, about 120 miles to our east, up through the forests into the Wyoming Valley. And he gathered an army of about 3,000 men. Now, some soldiers came up through Sunbury, and many of the supplies that fed the troops and much of the ammunition for the cannons and the rifles came up on flatboats from down around Harris Ferry or Harrisburg. And this was a very important post, Fort Augusta, in supporting the Sullivan expedition. And in July, Sullivan had all these soldiers up in what is now Wilkes-Barre, Kingston, Forty Fort, in the Wyoming Valley. And they had quite a celebration within individual regiments. And one of the officers who kept a diary was Lieutenant Thomas Blake. And he was a 26-year-old officer from Massachusetts. And he belonged...
Go ahead.
He belonged to the Brigadier General Enoch Poor's brigade. And on, well, here, let me read from his diary. On July 5th, the day after Independence Day, General Poor made an entertainment for the officers of his brigade in commemoration of American independence. And after dinner, the following toasts were drank. Now remember, there were 13 states in the new union. And so this toast consisted of 13 toasts. The first toast was to the United States. The second was to July 4th, 1776, the memorable date. The third was to the Grand Council, or essentially the Continental Congress of America. The fourth was to General Washington and the Army. The fifth was to the King and Queen of France. Well, France had just come in
Helped us
as
out.
allies,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was an important development. And the sixth toast was to General Sullivan and the Western Expedition. Now, we don't think of ourselves as being out west, but Sullivan thought of the Susquehanna Valley as being out west, and so did his men.
Well, sure.
Sure, okay. And I'm not going to read all 13, but there were 13 toasts altogether. And that wasn't at all unusual in Northumberland in 1808. There were 17 toasts. And I haven't checked this out, but my guess is that when I check it, I'm going to find that there were 17 states by 1808. And one was one toast per state. And in Northumberland that year, the good people had a band, and every time a toast was drank, the band played a tune. And some of these tunes I never heard of, but when they got to the 12th toast, they drank to commerce, untrammeled by the tyrants of the ocean. And then the tune was Yankee Doodle. So we would have recognized some of this, and whatever.
I'm thinking these people like to drink.
Oh, I'm sure that they did.
A lot of toast.
And I'm sure they had lots of toasts, and I'm sure that some of them had to be helped home, and some of them may have just stayed at home. Now, the funniest anecdote that I came across was a very fine cannon. You can go see this cannon today. It's in the museum at the Northumberland County Historical Society on North Front Street. It's a huge thing, and it weighed about a ton. And it was brought to Sunbury, upriver, up the Susquehanna, on a flatboat in 1756 or 1757 as the fort was being built. It was one of 6 or 8 guns that controlled the river. And it was never fired necessarily in a battle, but it served. And after the Revolutionary War, it made its way down to the riverfront at Front and Market. And on July 4th, the good townspeople of the borough of Sunbury, and I'm saying borough, not city, the borough would get up early on July 4th, and they would have quite a crowd, and they would fire off the cannon. Now, this cannon hailed back to colonial times. And then in 1824, the town woke up one morning and the cannon was gone. Some youngsters from Selinsgrove, hooligans, had stolen it. And they took it down and they hid it. And they kept it hidden. And somebody went down and did some skulking around and found it. And he bribed the maid of the house where it was hidden. It was hidden in a locked room where there was a dog kept, and he bribed her. And so late at night, she took the dog to another room and left the door unlocked. And a whole bunch of Sunbury hooligans, the good guys this time, came in and took the cannon back. Now they had to get it out of town quietly and across the river so that on July 4th they could fire it. Boom, and they did.
John,
And everything.
that's a fantastic story. The rivalry between
Sure.
Selinsgrove and Sunbury goes back to that.
Well, absolutely. And some years later, it was stolen again. And this time, some hooligans from New Berlin took it. And that was around 1830. And in a while, it went from New Berlin to Selinsgrove. And we don't know how. And It stayed gone for many years. July 4th of 1839, two boys went over to Selinsgrove from Sunbury, and they just were snooping and spying, and they came back and told their buddies here that they had located it. It was kept in a fire hall in Selinsgrove. And that night, the good guys from Sunbury went down and recovered the cannon. And on morning, I guess it was July 5th, the next morning, the town awoke, Sunbury awoke, bang, to the explosion of the returned cannon. And when the cannon went off, it shot off near the residence of Captain Daniel Levy, and he came out of his house. He had a pistol in one hand and a sword in the other, prepared to defend the cannon against all comers.
Suffice to say that July 4th is a very special time in the Susquehanna Valley, and Sunbury in particular.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, John Moore, for these great stories about our history. And join us again next week for another edition of One on One. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you for watching One on One. We hope you will join us this coming Thursday at noon for a new installment.